Time for a college football one-on-one. We go single coverage, and this one's kind of unique because, in full disclosure, Michael Sanders was the one that kind of triggered the idea. By the way, he is the Associate Athletic Director for Communications and Marketing for the AU Trojans, and he's building something from scratch when it comes to building a college football program. There are a lot of different things in front and behind the scenes, and it's the first chance that we get to kind of see what it's like behind the scenes in building the information part of a college football program. Michael, thanks for dropping by.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So did I get the dynamic right? Because it's like, everybody looks at, okay, there's going to be a college football program and it's going to be in like a year or so and down the line and everything. Everybody's looking at everything above the waterline. It's like the old analogy of the dog that goes into the lake and chases after the stick. And all you see from the dog is the stick in the mouth of the dog as he's heading back to shore. That's what everybody sees, but everything below the waterline where the dog's kind of going like this and he's no one sees that. And that's why I wanted to kind of get into from an information standpoint is everything below the waterline. What's it been like?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It really is. A lot of times, the coaches will go out and they'll get interviewed and they'll talk about some of the things that they forget. Like Coach Lamb talked about even the straps for shoulder pad, the little clips, and how many extras of those that you have to purchase just to be prepared for your first year. So if you see all those things on the football side, but then you take a look on the opposite side and the administration, the presidents, the ADs, the campus safety officers, the guest services people, the sports information office, the marketing department, and doing all these little things that they've never done before, and especially at this scale. We typically at a basketball game have somewhere between 700 to 1,000 people. Our first football game here on campus, we had about 6,700 people. It's just a completely different ball game that you really it takes. They announced the program back in 21, and it took about every bit of those 3 to 4 years to figure out every bit and piece. We were talking about parking lots still the Thursday before our first kickoff on Saturday.
Is there and with Anderson University there in the SAC in the South Atlantic Conference, is there in the office somewhere in where you guys are, is there like a big whiteboard? Is there like a to-do list that's constantly there and evolving, or is it on? And I ask coaches this and owners this all the time about what startup programs. For me, it's like a legal pad. You remember when we'd go to the bank when we were young, and you had the dude sitting at the desk, and you had the glass on the top of the desk, and the bank calendar underneath with all the dates. Schedule on a magnet that's attached to the fridge. You've got an idea at 3 o'clock in the morning, or the big 5 by 7 foot whiteboard with the dry erasables. Where is that to-do list for you guys?
Yeah, so we're at least in the 21st century a little bit with it. We did do a lot of our preparation on Google Sheets. We had a nice spread out that one of our game ops people put together. We did a lot of our planning through that, and it was, if someone had a question, someone had a thought, just put it in there, and we can address it our next meeting. I will say, I have this little notebook that I usually have in my office that my wife's dad actually made a nice little leather thing here for me. But yeah, it's my little jot down if I have a moment's notice thing to kind of grab. But we've been doing a lot of it through Google Sheets, a lot of it through email. But those first, I mean, basically all summer, we were having meetings every week going over what was added to that Google Sheet, what questions came up from the other side of campus, because we did do a pretty good job, I think, of kind of delineating everything. So like we as an athletic department aren't necessarily running our concession stands. We're having our on-campus food vendor help run the concession stands. Well, it's still an athletic event, so they still have to kind of work through us to get all those things set up. And where are they going to set up? Where are they going to store all their product? Are they going to take cash? Are they just going to take car? Like it's so many little things you can't think about until someone asks the question. And I think, like I mentioned about the parking, I mean, we were still talking about it that Thursday because people asked questions on Wednesday. that we didn't have an answer to yet. So it was like, oh, well, we need to think about that. We need to take into account what's going to happen. We have our homecoming game next weekend, and we're already talking about parking for that and how we're going to try and handle all the homecoming events that we have from on campus, plus now throwing in a football game attached to it when they're kind of doing everything up here on our athletic campus that we have. It's going to be fun. It's going to be hectic, but we're going to get through it. But it's just those little things.
You ever have a moment where, or anybody there on staff, where they sit there and go, "What have I gotten myself into here?"
I think that was the Friday night before. I think people were still kind of like we were still seeing our ticket numbers creep up a little bit. We had probably 15 to 1600 that bought day of the game for that first game, and we're sitting there thinking if we have 5 grand, that's going to be a great day. It's
Hmm.
going to be a great day. And at the end, when we have that 6,700 almost, it's just like, okay, it was a great day. But the thing we were talking about throughout the entire week is we know something's going to go wrong. There's no way that over the past 6 to 7 months, we can sit there and plan and have contingencies for every little thing. Something is going to go wrong. The question that we have is it something going wrong that we could have controlled or something that went wrong that was completely out of our control? And I think the only thing that went wrong was a little completely out of our control. So I think we ended up in a pretty good place there.
From an information standpoint, this is the second time that you've been a part of a startup. I guess what lessons did you take from the first time that helped you out here with the second time and helped everyone else around you in athletic communications?
Yeah, I think the biggest things were just trying to remember those little pieces. We get to the first game day when I was at Limestone, and we were starting off, and we had, 3 people that were in our stats booth. One person was trying to call every single play, and we had 2 people that were tracking participation. And all they basically do were circle someone who goes out on the field, and then once they go out on the field, you never have to circle them again. You're not worried about them. And that was just it wasn't a good use of our staff. It wasn't a good use of the resources that we had. So kind of switching up that here as well. But even the pieces that you put on the jumbotron, I kind of tailored a lot of the stuff that I ended up using at Limestone to use here when it comes to like the scoreboard and how the layout was shown on our jumbotron. But it's a trial and error process through that because okay, you put the time here, where's the quarter going, where's the timeouts left going, where's the score going, are you going to have stats on the board, are you not going to have stats on the board, is somebody going to complain because they don't know how many total yards that the team has had because it's nowhere to be seen anywhere when you've got this big huge video board in the corner. um so really, it's just those little things that I picked up kind of in that first trial game per se for Limestone. We were lucky at Limestone that we played our games at Gaffney High School, which is a very large high school in the upstate of South Carolina. It seats about 10,000. And our first game there, we only had about 3,500 fans. Um, and one of the things I mentioned to our team here was that we had one ambulance for the entire stadium at a 1 o'clock kickoff at the first week of September in
Mm.
the state of South Carolina.
Ooh, yes, slightly
And
tough.
I said, I said, we can't do that here. We had at Limestone, we had, I think, 17 to 20 people that ended up having to get transported to the
Wow,
nearby hospital for something heat related
wow.
because the people we contracted there for concessions ran out of water before halftime and never brought any more. So it was like that's the biggest thing that I really made sure that people knew was I was like, we have to be prepared for these kind of things. We have to have response teams for what happens on the field, but we also need response teams for what's happening in the stands. Because if we're planning for 5 to 6,000 on a hot sunny day on a Saturday in September, it's gonna be hot. There is going to be at least a handful of people that don't drink as much water as they're supposed to, And lo and behold, we did have a good number of people did fall out in that first game, but we were prepared for it. And we had the EMS response, we had the quick response teams there, and everybody was taken care of very quickly. We didn't have to call additional units because the county and the city, and that was the other good thing. We have such a good partnership with Anderson County and the emergency management system here, through our campus safety office and through our school of public service and administration actually is located in the same building as Anderson County Emergency Management. So that helps a lot. They talk a good bit. Um, just the connections there and the communication that happened between them and our chief Amon and our sergeant, lieutenant sergeant is his name. His last name's Sergeant, but he's lieutenant, so it gets really confusing. We just call him Sarge,
There you go.
so he gets a promotion automatically, I think. But yeah, they did a good job of handling that side of it, and we have Anderson City Cops here, Anderson Fire, Anderson EMS here at every game, that really have helped us kind of get that all taken care of. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I learned from that first thing that I really talked about when we were going through the process here was like, hey, we need to have this. Like it has to be it has to look like we know what we're doing because we've never done this before. And if it doesn't look like we know what we're doing, people are going to notice. But if we look like we know what we're doing, I always like to make the metaphor of a restaurant. The kitchen can be on fire, but if the dining room doesn't know, you're fine.
Mhm.
Everything can be completely lost their minds behind those double doors. But if the dining room and your patrons don't know that everything's gone haywire, then you're good. You're fine.
Michael Sanders, Associate AD for Communications and Marketing, who is building something for the second time from scratch at Anderson University as they are in their first season of football. And like I said, we figured we'd do something a little different as we do our investigations and knock on doors of all the first year programs. Anderson, by the way, is in the SAC in a Division Two. The way you mentioned your analogy, and I was going to say it's kind of almost like being the offensive lineman for a program where if you're doing your job, teams driving down the field and they're scoring in whatever form it is. The only time folks talk about offensive linemen is when there's a penalty flag thrown or a block is missed or something like that. And so I look at what everyone does in an administrative sense and you guys in a communication sense, just trying to, and literally as we've gone through this, it's like, oh yeah, there's that. Oh yeah, there's that. Oh, all the little things that those of us who come and cover games and watch games, we're like, yeah, okay. Yeah, everything's fine. Water's calm, everything's cool. And you guys are just like, well, we have to do this and this and this and all these little things. It just, when you mention it, it's a really wide ranging thing of things that a lot of us do not think about. And you guys have to 99% of the time.
Yeah, and it even boils down to on game day. Our script for our PA announcer and our jumbotron and everything that we're doing from a production standpoint, for a game entertainment standpoint, if you will, it's 13 to 14 pages long every week. And that falls back on me on a weekly basis. We're trying to figure out how do we navigate our 90-second media timeouts that we get in D1. They get 2 minutes and 45 seconds for their media timeouts, and they get to take them whenever ESPN feels like it. Here we have to work with the officials, and we get one a quarter, and it's 90 seconds long, and we don't really have much leeway in that 90-second time period. So it's making sure that we're activating all the sponsorships that we need to activate. We have a 100-yard dash that we do at halftime with Groucho's Deli, that they've given us a bunch of stuff for, and that's been a great activation. We just started the chicken salad chick kick this past week, which is a mouthful and a tongue twister. I have not tried to say it 3 times fast yet because I feel like I'd fail after the first time. But we got that one rolling this past week as well. But yeah, I mean, we have game day sponsors that we're trying to make sure we get recognized on the field and get video shots up on the jumbotron of them, and we're recognizing faculty and staff members of the game every time. I mentioned this next home game we have on the 5th of October is our homecoming game. So we get a 25-minute halftime, but I was told the other day that our homecoming court wants to take about 18 minutes of that 25-minute halftime. So it's still like every game is a little bit more of a challenge too, because you're trying to, as you evolve and see more and more things, that you can be like, well, we had a 60-second timeout and there wasn't really anything going on. Can we put something there? Well, we could, but I can't guarantee that a 60-second timeout's going to happen every quarter. Like, do we want to plan to have it and see if it happens, or do we want to not plan it and then just be like, okay, well, it is there if we need it, but we can't really plan for it.
How much sleep do you and your staff get during the season?
Uh, Not nearly as much as we should. I'll tell you that. But I mean, that's honestly just an SID's life. I mean, yeah, I say I try and catch up on my sleep from May to September, May to August, but I my wife works for the minor league team here, the Greenville Drive. So I spend a lot of time with them, doing some work over the summer. So I don't even catch up on my sleep over summer, realistically. I'm just sports 24/7, 365. But yeah, no, I mean, I've tried to, as a leader in my department, kind of take a lot of that brunt force off of the rest of my office, because, as you know, they've never done it before either. So I want them to learn the good parts of it, and then I can show them the bad parts later down the road. There's no reason for them to sit there and stress on a 20 to, a 20-hour day the day before our first football game, when I probably will do that. I slept maybe 3 to 4 hours before our first kickoff. And we had, an 8 o'clock security meeting. So like our game day operations meeting was 8 o'clock on the morning of a 1 o'clock kickoff. So, I'm already here on campus at 8. I was like, there's so much to do. I'll just get there at like 7, start doing some stuff, and go run out to that meeting. But yeah, no, you're right. The sleep is few and far between. We take these respites of weeks off. At least when I say week off, week of without a home game. There's obviously still plenty to do with a road game, and clipping things for social media and whatnot. Um, but it's a lot less stressful for us, on our side, because we don't have to be preparing the programs and printing flip cards and getting two deeps and making sure that all the videos are loaded on the video board and making sure all the scripts are done and making sure I've got a full staff of play clock operators, scoreboard operator, camera operators, jumbotron operators, making sure we added a replay to football this year, in our conference, and making sure all the replay stuff is all set up. We got complaints from the officials the second week, because they did replay on an iPad, and we got the biggest iPad they make, and they were like, "Well, this screen is just too small. We can't see it." So our AD was like, "Can we do something about that?" And I go, "Yeah." So I went to Walmart, got a 43-inch TV for them, and hooked up the iPad to it. We didn't get a complaint this week about it being too small. So.
I mean, that's fantastic. Right now, 2-1 in season number one, getting ready for a road game at Barton in the SAC coming up on Saturday before the homecoming against Catawba on October 5th. So my last question for you is this: what advice would you give a startup athletic program, football program? Let's keep it with football since that's where we are. So, what advice would you give a startup football program from a logistics, communication, sports information standpoint? What's the first piece of advice that you would give as they go down this road, knowing that they're going to have that first game at some point?
Yeah, I think it's something that Anderson had actually did a pretty good job of here, was to make sure that you use those resources that are available to you. Um, our athletic director, our game ops people, before I got here even, went to at least a handful of SAC schools and just witnessed what goes on a game day. So they sat down in the press box, they looked at everything that goes on from that side of things, what goes on the field when it comes to, the chain crew, officials, how are they getting them to and from the field? What kind of security is happening? What are they doing at the gates for ticket scanning? How are they selling tickets at the game? How are they doing parking? All those kind of things that they were really looking for at each of these places that they visited. And it's the same thing, honestly, from the sports information side. If you can find someone that has gone through it recently, luckily had gone through it recently from my own personal side of things. And at Limestone, I helped start it. And then I was at Newberry for 2 years as well. And Newberry has a very good football program that's very established. So learning kind of some of the things that they did and for a successful program from the football side of things really helped as well. So I was kind of that resource for myself this time, just having done it. But we're such a tight-knit community in athletic communications. I mean, I have every phone number of every SID in our conference and just about every one of the Southeast actually now too. My assistant sometimes will go like, "Hey, do you know the SID at this place?" And I go, "Yeah, we worked together when I was at here and they were there." And they're like, "Okay, yeah, you just know people." I was like, "Well, yes, that's what you do in this industry, It's halfway about networking, halfway about what you know." So realistically, getting that network base, finding someone that will kind of help mentor you through that starting process, because again, there's going to be things you don't know, and you just don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you don't know to ask the questions about the things you don't know, and that's what that conversation with those kind of people would help lead to, is maybe some of those things that you just hadn't thought about, and brings you to a point where you're going to be more probably over prepared. But being over prepared in this situation is much better than being under prepared.
And no question is ever a bad question.
Correct.
Another one of the things that we always get to learn. Michael, fantastic. Thanks for going single coverage with us to break things down from a perspective I don't think a lot of folks get to understand when it comes to startup programs and things like that with football. Here's the business card for him: Associate Athletic Director for Communications and Marketing, and he's only in charge of keeping track of 4 sports individually when it comes to everything there on campus, while he's trying to start athletic communications for a football program in Division II in the SAC that's 2-1 and on the road this coming week. Did I get it all? Did I miss anything?
I'm sure there's something you missed, but it's as I always tell people, the best way to explain my job is if you know that bullet point down the bottom of your contract that says other duties as assigned, there you go.
Absolutely. So, Michael, fantastic. Thanks for dropping by and pulling back the curtain a little bit and letting everybody know what's going on. Be safe. May all of the notes be spell checked correctly by all of the AI overlords and whatever sits there and says, your grammar is incorrect. And that's like, no, that's supposed to be that way. Thanks for dropping by, going single coverage. We'll catch up and we'll keep an eye on everything up there at Anderson.
Absolutely. Thank you.